Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining our Agile Learning Labs LinkedIn Live. This month, our special guest is Joe Kennedy. Thanks for joining us tonight. Joe is a regular at our Monday office hours. They are at our Scrum Professionals meetup. Every Monday, we talk about Agile challenges. We commiserate on how our weeks have gone. We talk all things Scrum, and Joe has been amazing and helpful for all of the people there, giving great advice. So we're really thankful that you join us for those, Joe, and that you are here tonight. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's great. I love the office hours, and I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. Well, it is just the two of us. I mentioned to Joe earlier, we don't have Chris tonight. Chris is on vacation, and Joe and I were wondering what that word meant, vacation, because I don't know if either one of us. When was your last vacation, Joe?
This one right here, this yellow picture, is 4 or 5 years ago. That's Reykjavik at midnight.
Oh, wow. That's gorgeous. That's a good one. Yeah, mine
Yep.
was last one I can remember was I think September last year in Mexico. Spent about a week there. Didn't want to leave. And
Yeah.
Andy is joining us from San Mateo. Hi, Andy. Thanks for being here. So, Joe, my
Yes.
first and most important question to you. I once saw on a LinkedIn post that you responded to about Dungeons and Dragons. Do you play D&D?
I do.
Oh.
My current campaign is we've switched over to Pathfinder though, but yes, we
Mhm.
do the tabletop RPGs. I have a group that I've been playing with for 4 or 5 years.
Nice. What is your go-to class?
Oh, it's usually a halfling rogue. If somebody was doing a one-off and I needed to put something together quickly, that's usually what I go for.
Very cool. I myself tend towards the clerics. I like the healing, those kind of roles. Kind of apt for an agile practitioner to want to bring people together and heal. But I could also see how we would go rogue as well. Yours definitely fits with the theme. And speaking of agile, this is a LinkedIn Live kind of about your agile experience and your career. And I saw that you actually started off your career as a teacher. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Back when George Bush the first was still in office, I graduated with a physics degree. And the end of his term, it also resulted in a very poor economy. And so I was working at a service station for a couple of years, but reached out to one of my old teachers at my alma mater. I ended up teaching math and physics there for a couple of years and that's down in Los Angeles. And I did that until I moved up here to Portland.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
then you switched to tech from teaching math and physics. Like, that is quite a change. What brought that about?
Desperation. Um,
Oh,
I,
okay.
I moved up here to Portland. I spent the summer looking for teaching jobs. Didn't find anything, and then I started branching out. And the first job that I got, I was doing call center support for CompuServe, one of the big
Mhm.
competitors for AOL at the time. And then that opened up because right just a little bit further down the road was in one of the big Intel campuses, and
Mhm.
I ended up there in the call center. If anybody remembers the news about the floating point divide flaw, I was in the call center handling that at the time,
Wow.
and that was my foot in the door there for 20 odd years at Intel.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think it was Oren, another person that we talked to, was also starting out in tech and support in a support role. And that's one of the things that we talk about is just getting your foot into tech and that experience in tech. It's such a different world. And however you can really get your foot in the door to kind of experience the culture of tech really gives you a leg up into future positions.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, how did you go from the call center into your other roles? What was your career trajectory like?
Sure. So a couple of years in the call center, and then email and news group support too, and then eventually I was working within the support.intel.com domain. So I was working with the teams that were as a stakeholder for the teams building those apps, and then I joined as a project manager for those apps. So like the content management tool, the download tool, I was involved in all of those, and that is the
Mhm.
direct segue into agile practices. One of the developers on the download application came in one day. He said, "I've heard about this process. It's called extreme programming. We're going to do it." And that's exactly what we did. We took over some back warehouse space. We set up some tables and a bunch of computers so we can all sit together, and we started with extreme programming. And that was it for me. I became the loudmouth in my organization. Every big face to face was like, "We should do agile. We should do agile." And I think they eventually just gave me and let me do a project agile just to shut me up.
And how did that go?
Oh, it was good. I
Mhm.
much to a lot of people's surprise in that particular organization, again, fixed mindset. It was surprising to see how things went. Yeah.
Yeah. What can you describe the differences in the projects that you worked on when just thinking about how they were before Agile and maybe after Agile? Like, what did you see in the projects or the products or the people that made a big impact by using Agile?
Oh, I mean, beforehand, I mean, it was dogmatically waterfall. We actually had
Mhm.
presentations where they showed it up on screen, the different step down through the different phases of the project. And that's, we mean, we were wrapped up in that. And again, all of the common struggles that we talk about, where change of scope, change in resources, change in funding, everything that makes all those things difficult, we were experiencing. But in my organization, the project team or the developers were blamed for those issues.
Mhm.
So it really, we had massive amounts of documentation that required. I used to write product requirement documents that had 300 or 400 requirements on them. Um,
Ooh.
and the developers would estimate the project by counting the pages. I mean, it,
Oh
it, it
no.
they just it was just oh, that's 4 months, and that was it.
Mhm.
So it moving away to something where you were trying to get a little bit more iterative, trying to be, trying to and uh, make sure that people didn't misunderstand what was going on. Some of them, again, common misconceptions, documentation right out the window, ambiguity is the rule, and all these other
Mhm.
things that uh, uh, opinions that I was fighting all the time. But no, I really loved that transition. It was very foundational for me.
It's the whole like, "Oh, we're going agile, no rules, no documentation." That's what that means. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard that a time or two before. So did
Hmm.
you come from any sort of training or experience in waterfall project management? Was that the world that you knew as a project manager?
Yeah, we were specifically grounded in it. We sat down
Mhm.
and were told this is the process we were going to follow. And there were other add-ons to that. We had to do CMMI for a while, which was an incredibly complex documentation and cataloging effort. And
Ooh.
everything had to be if anything changed, it all had to be versioned, and all of those different versions had to be cataloged and stored. It was just so much overhead. And, I mean, you thought Agile was tossing documentation out the window, but this was just putting it in boxes in the closet, and I couldn't understand why we were doing that.
Oh no. So when you were moving from the waterfall kind of system into agile, did you have to do any kind of training or reading, or how did you prepare for that change?
Um, After we did when we were doing the extreme programming project, we were winging it, but
Mhm.
eventually, because of some of the other groups, we had somebody come in and do some in-house training for us. So that's when I think my first certification was a CSPO. I can't remember, but
Mhm.
that was probably it. Ken Rubin did that. If
Oh
anybody's
wow.
familiar with him, he did our first in-house, and then from then on, it was just whenever I could get it approved to go do anything, whenever there was some training budget allowed, I would go out and grab whatever I could. Mostly within the CSPO and CSM space.
Nice. So you were at the forefront really of kind of trying Agile out in your company. You were leading it with your teams. Did you see its adoption grow to other teams while you were there?
Um, I would say that there were, rather than putting me at the forefront of the vanguard, there were
Mhm.
several different groups that were doing it because there was a lot of different software groups. So there were several of us on a very common track, and yes, there was
Mhm.
some very growing network of us that were doing this,
Nice.
and we as a group of leaders around that started working together as well.
Okay. And how would you describe your role? Were you kind of a scrum master or a product owner? Where would you place yourself in that?
Um, at the beginning. I was usually a product owner,
Hmm.
and it was one of those occasions where the business side you could only be a product owner, and the development or IT side you could only be a scrum master. So based on where we sat, we had those divisions.
Hmm.
But eventually, I found a way. I would sometimes coach those other scrum masters, or we would talk about things together. But eventually over time finding a different group where I could finally become a full-time scrum master.
That's awesome. I've found that having that experience in product has served me well becoming a scrum master because you are, or if you have experience as a developer too, and then you take on that role of scrum master, any of that really helps you to speak the same language as your product owner or your developers to really kind of understand and empathize the struggles of the product owner having to talk to stakeholders or the
Right.
developers getting into the code. Anything you can do where you have that experience doing the roles and then you get to bring that to coaching the roles really gives you a leg up in any kind of scrum master leadership or coaching role.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. As you said, it gives you an opportunity to develop a lot of empathy. And in fact, going back to what we were talking about, it's just a different character sheet, and so it allows you to think in different ways.
I love that. And then you're there as the coach, kind of guiding them towards rolling more nat 20s. You hope. There's only
Yeah,
so much
exactly.
within your control, but
As
hoping.
long as they're not critical fails, yeah.
Oh, no. Although, that does happen sometimes, and
It
we learn
absolutely
from
does.
those.
Hmm.
Actually, yeah, that's a really good question. As you were starting to adopt Agile and XP, did you have any moments where you were thinking, "Oh, this isn't gonna work," or "This is failing," or you had resistance? Like, what challenges were you facing?
Uh, Depending on where which time frame,
Mhm,
very earlier on when we were early adopters to the processes, it was a lot of the conflict was more about how our mindset was interfering with the management mindset and vice versa.
mhm.
So they would, it was great that we were doing working in sprints, but we still need a Gantt chart. We still need all of these. We need the management processes in place. So until they started getting on board and realizing that they didn't need to manage the development of the developers, they just needed to manage the developers,
Mhm.
and start to go that way. Yeah, we started seeing a lot of those, and then some of them were my own fault. My first role as a scrum master, I was by the book cookie cutter. We have to do it this way. You're doing it
Yeah.
wrong. So it took me. That was one of my learning lessons myself.
No, me too, absolutely. The Scrum Guide says we need to do this. Like, oh man, I'm just embarrassed looking back. Um, so I'm curious, I saw that you were at Intel for, was it 24 years? Is that right?
If I count my time as a contractor, yes, it was 24
Yeah.
years.
And that's pretty unusual these days, especially in tech. We see a lot of people kind of drifting back and forth between different companies and different roles. Tell me about the 24 years at Intel and what made you stay for so long.
Well, one thing is at a company that's that large, 100,000
Hmm.
people. and I don't know what they are now after their layoffs this year, but that large, each of the different groups inside they're almost distinct entities.
Hmm.
So you can be moving around a little bit and not and be within completely different hierarchies. But that being said, why was I there that long? Part of it was just, taking the safe road, and for a lot of things, and not taking a lot of. Honestly, I've even gone through the counseling for it. There's a lot of other opportunities and risks I should have taken in my career, but there are a couple of reasons, personal reasons, that I just chose to stay safe for a long time.
I think that there should be less, I don't know, shame is not the right word, but I don't think there's really anything wrong with choosing to be safe and stable. Like, I wish that we celebrated that more as a society, especially these days where life is kind of crazy. Like, I'm hearing
Yeah.
you say, oh, I should have, I wish I had. And I don't, my heart is going out to you. Like, please stop beating yourself up. I think you
Oh,
did the right
yeah.
thing.
The self-flagellation stopped a long time ago, I mean, it's a fine balance between being too risky and too safe. Just like we would talk
Mhm.
about, and even within the agility mindset. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's there, and I should have done things differently, but I am where I am now.
Yeah, we have learned and we inspect and adapt.
Hmm.
And something that you said about Intel sounded a lot like my experience at Amazon as well. I came from being a librarian and then into tech and kind of some culture shock there. And I started on one team and then I moved to a different team. And it was like being at a completely different company. Amazon, I think, can get some bad, I guess, rumors or a bad reputation about working there, but I think it really depends on your team and your manager. And I got really lucky and had a great experience kind of in those microcosms where I was. And it
Hmm.
sounds like Intel was kind of the same, like its own entity, and you can move around within the company.
Yeah, and just like you, I had some fantastic management and some fantastic leadership, but I also had some
Mhm.
dreadful ones too. So yeah, you take the good with the bad.
Absolutely. In your kind of agile roles at Intel or really anywhere else, what do you think are the biggest impacts that you have made on your teams or at the company?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question. You did feed me this one, and
No, this is all spontaneous
it's all
conversation, Joe.
complete pulling it out of the air. Uh, One of the at Intel, one of my biggest, I think one of my bigger accomplishments, I worked with the revenue team within
Mhm.
Intel, the group that calculated capital earnings for the company that was reported out quarterly for Wall Street. When I joined that team, they were working in local spreadsheets, and they had their own. Each of those individuals had their own personal mojo on what they would do and how they adjust numbers here and there, and oh, I know that one's not right, and we know we have this in the warehouse right now. So it was very amorphous.
Mhm.
And when I joined the team, and we collaborated on making some changes, we created a rough backlog, and we knew we had quarters to work, because um, quarter close and quarter open was the last and first week of every quarter. We worked New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. We worked the 4th of July weekends, things like that.
Wow.
So we would create a time frame within each quarter, usually about
Mhm.
10 weeks, and give ourselves a buffer. We would look at what the next item was that we were trying to systemize. We would work to make that in make that build it, get it into the system, get it validated and
Mhm.
integrated and functionally tested, so that when we went live for the close of quarter, we had something else that we could do. And if we were saving 4 hours of one person's job in the quarter, that was considered a huge success. So that's what we did. We ended up. I was working with them for 2 years, just doing that, automating what we could, and creating workbooks where we could, and able to speed that up and get it all off of their local desktops.
That is huge. I mean, not only from time savings perspective, it also sounds like it's kind of eliminating some of that like local dependence or tribal knowledge dependence and kind of moving them towards more of a team mentality versus working group. Would you say
A-
some of that was going on?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we actually became a pretty tightly bound group. I mean, the other thing is, if there was a correct, if Intel needed to issue a correction after their initial reporting to Wall Street, there would be a fine. So our job was to prevent that, reduce the amount of times that happened, and prevent it as much as possible.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I would say that's huge impact, huge win. And Oren is commenting that we may be breaking the immersion effect here. Yes, behind the curtain, we do start with a few just questions for our guests that they do get in advance. But this is just like Agile. We do adapt to change and kind of go wherever it is that we want to go in the
Exactly.
conversation. Sometimes to good things, sometimes I don't know, maybe Dungeons and Dragons. We could talk about that for the entire LinkedIn Live, but we won't.
Different
We've
session.
talked about, yeah, totally different session. Maybe on our next one, we should get some Agile people to play D&D live. That would be fun. Do you know any good DMs, Joe, or GMs? What do you call them now?
I could
Dungeon
see if so.
masters?
I could see if there's somebody available. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I will hold you to that. See, that was definitely not a script.
Yeah.
We talked about kind of your impact and highlights, a little bit of your challenges. Are there any other kind of challenges or things that you maybe wish you'd done differently in your Agile career?
There are things that I don't know if I could say done differently, but at the very least wished for different outcomes.
Hmm.
My last employer, that where I was laid off at the beginning of the year, when I was hired, it was right at the beginning of their agile transformation, and the consultant that was my final interview pretty much put the continuation of the transformation on my shoulders. He knew his term was coming up, and so right away I was jumping into, interacting with the C-suite, interacting with directors, which was more than I was used to at that time. But trying to do that, trying to do innovation exercises, trying to make convincing arguments for changes outside of engineering, and as well. And I had a lot of successes, a lot of processes we streamlined and made more efficient and effective. But there was still that layer of leadership. That's an expensive meeting. That's a lot of people to take away from their computers for that long. There's a lot of resistance to change. A lot of even the CEO to me one day said, I still need to show numbers of what we're to show that we're doing something. So there's a lot of that always in the background. And so when the conditions turned earlier this year, those were the ones that I think won out. And
Yeah.
so I haven't heard how things are going on the inside, but
Hmm.
yeah, they made that change, and that's what I wish. I I can't go back and pinpoint things I wish I'd done specifically differently at the time, but there are,
Hmm.
as I said, outcomes I wished had been different.
So, where are you now in your career?
I'm in searching mode. I'm
Hmm.
putting out applications and resumes based on some suggestions in one of Sander Durr's Discord group. I've started throwing applications out to the Czech Republic and the Netherlands, and just kind of expanding my base out that way. I have family in Ireland, so I've been leveraging that and trying to get some applications out as well.
Oh, that's awesome. You are going global with your search, it sounds like.
Oh yeah.
What are you looking for? Any particular roles or companies? Like, what's on your search list?
Not not specific roles and not specific companies.
Mhm.
I had a couple of interviews with Columbia Sportswear and with Patagonia Sportswear. So
Oh, nice.
they're the websites I look at every day. Just because Columbia is like 5 miles away. And they're really
Mhm.
convenient and really good mission. But otherwise, I'm looking at product owner roles, scrum master roles, agile coach roles, technical project management type situations as well. Just trying to keep an open mind about a lot of that stuff.
Nice, because you have all of that experience too, as product owner, as project manager, as scrum master, as agile coach. So that
Right.
really anybody who hires you for any one of those roles is getting all of those roles at once. So
Yeah.
they're going to be
Yep.
very lucky to have your
Yeah.
experience.
Exactly. And that's my pitch on my resume, and that's pretty much how I present it out whenever I get a chance to interview.
Is there any kind of particular culture that you feel like you do well in?
Um, eh, uh, there's a lot of cultures that I've been in where, like I explained with my last company, there's a lot of pushing mud uphill. Um, I
I've never heard
I
that expression. That's amazing.
um, but what I'm really looking for is an opportunity where I actually have to pump the brakes and slow them down. There's that much
Wow,
enthusiasm. It's they're more about getting organized and directed rather than having to be convinced.
nice. So they're ready to go and they're looking for somebody, and you're gonna kind of be the one to say, let's you have a lot of great ideas. Let's focus on a few.
Right.
Yes. Oh, we do that so much as agile coaches. Like you could only pick one thing. How is your job search going? Any tips for people?
I, I I can tell you the things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm updating my resume weekly, fine tuning, tweaking. I use some of the AI engines to scan for keywords, so making sure I'm getting those added to my resume. Sometimes even in white text at the bottom if it doesn't fit in contextually. I'm using some of the AI apps to help me with the cover letters and that. But otherwise, it's just a Tommy Lee Jones manhunt, every doghouse outhouse type of a thing, and just getting out as many resumes as I can.
Now, once you do get hired by a very lucky company to work with very lucky teams and you've been there a while, what do you see yourself doing for those company and teams in 5 years? Where do you want to be in that kind of a longer term future?
What I really most enjoyed about my previous role was when I initiated the process to get the roadmap, the plans for 6 or 7 different development teams, support teams, DevOps, um, get uh, get all of those plans documented into a shareable format where they're integrating both the product initiatives and the technical necessities that they need to do. If they have to do some replatforming, if they have to deprecate something, so getting all of those munged in and Tetrised together and documented. So when somebody's yelling at us, marketing or sales is coming at us, it's like you can come in, we can do that, but you have to tell us which is more and which is less important. And having that up and ready to go and updated almost 2 or 3 times a quarter. Um, I really enjoyed that. I would love to at least make that a part of what I was doing wherever I am.
I am hearing that you enjoy thriving in chaos. Is that fair to say? I mean, that's a very rogue-like trait too. There's all this stuff going on and we want this transformation and you come in and you just make it organized and seamless and beautiful for teams and companies.
I try to, as long as there's a drop off of the chaos, I'm good. If it's continuous and additive, that can be a little bit too much.
Got it. Absolutely. Like balance always, mental health, taking care of yourself, making sure your teams are taking care of themselves, also a very important role of
Right.
ours as well.
Hmm.
But Joe, I'm going to ask you this. I want you to pretend that I am a prospective employer. Uh, Tell me, why should I hire you?
Um, I consider myself a poker of bears, and I do have real life experience doing that. Um, I don't like the status quo. I'm more interested in making groups effective rather than efficient. Um, I enjoy researching, teaching, coaching, and facilitating, and bringing in new processes to try, not in, not to force it down anybody's throats. And I love when the team or the organization finds their aha moment where they're like, "Oh, I get it." So yeah, that's I want to come in and do that. That's
Mhm.
exactly what I want to draw. Just drop me in, let me find my footing, and let me start doing that kind of stuff.
Any team company leaders that work with you, they are going to be so lucky and so spoiled by your just enthusiasm, discipline, and organization. I can't wait to see who gets you, where you land. They're going to be fighting it
Yep.
out. Okay, wait, poking a bear in real life?
I worked at a summer camp in the mountains above Southern California, up near Wrightwood, if anybody's familiar with the area, and we had bears every night. They especially like pasta. Um, so the rangers told us that we could shoot them, which is just going to make them angry, or we could get a bunch of slingshots and shoot them in the butt every night, and that's what we did. We stood out by the dining hall and just every night just shot them in the butts with slingshots.
I mean, I guess once you've slingshotted a bear in the butt, an agile transformation is nothing to you.
Yeah, well, luckily the bears never turned around and came at us. So
Oh, that's good. So, totally unrelated, outside of all this agile stuff, if you weren't an agile coach, if that was off the table, you can't be an agile coach or a product owner or a technical project manager, you have to do something totally different. What would you be doing?
quite possibly back at teaching,
Mhm.
or if I had lottery money, I could sit down and start writing. I have a couple of ideas of putting a few things in book form.
Nice. Or you could go out and poke some bears for fun.
They're a lot bigger up here, so I don't know.
Oh, no, maybe not. Um, Joe, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you tonight. I just want to thank you for your time and kind of sharing a bit about your career journey. And we all have our fingers crossed that you are going to land somewhere as amazing as you are.
I hope so. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you. And I wanted to say thank you to everyone who joined us, who's watching, who's commenting. We really appreciate you being here. We hope to see you at our Monday office hours. Check it out on Meetup for Scrum professionals. It's an awesome community. Jill will be there. I will be there. And once again, thanks for being
Mhm.
here. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.